Hey superstars, welcome back to another episode of Word Up with Danny Katz, Alpha Gals Go Deep edition. Yes, hunter-muse, Alpha Gal Extraordinaire, is back for another Alpha Gals Go Deep. Hey superstars, welcome back to another episode of Word Up with Danny Katz. Today I am joined by my Alpha Gals Go Deep cohort, hunter-muse. This is our third installment of our Alpha Gals series. And before we dive in, I am reminding you to, thanking you for clicking that subscribe button, for liking, sharing, and commenting. Your comments go a long way in nudging me up in the algorithm. I'm also giving you a heads up that I am just coming back to the land of the living after being down with a 5-day spike protein reaction that hit me very, very hard. So full transparency, I'm a little slow in this episode, but I do find my footing at some point, I think. I'm also reminding you how the show is structured. The first half is free on all of the audio podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube. The second half is for paid supporters on my locals and Patreon channels. The links for both of those are listed in the comment section. You can join either one of those platforms or both for as little as $5 a month, which gets you access to all of the second halves of my conversations, plus oodles of bonus content. That does it for housekeeping. Buckle up and prepare to enjoy this episode of Alpha Gals Go Deep with hunter-muse. Let's dive in. Where do you want to start? We have so many things on the agenda. Like, I'm totally going to let you lead where you want us to go, and I will just follow because I'm still in a liminal space.
I totally hear you. Well, I just sent you this clip.
I saw it.
And I just wrote down because I'm pedantic about making sure I quote people accurately or as close to accurately as I possibly can. So I wrote down the text of what was said, and maybe at some point, if you want to drop that in so that your audience can see what we're talking about, that may be valuable. I don't know the context of where this man on the street thing happened. It sounds like it was Australia. I don't know the context of the interview that the woman was responding to the man on the street situation, but I think it's an important thing to examine as alpha females and
totally
our perspectives of sex and sexuality and how we look at each other and how we look at sex as, in terms of partnership. And just to give the viewers a little bit of context, it's a man on the street interview with some women in Australia. They may be a little tipsy, maybe a little saucy. I don't know. It's people in Australia, in my experience, drink a lot.
I just sent it to myself if we want to do like a screen share. And do you want me to play it now?
Sure. I mean, I think it's valuable. I think it's a good place to start.
Okay, awesome. So let me share screen, make sure we've got sound going. Sorry, we're seeing lots of extra things that no one
like it.
All right.
I think that it's important before you get married to tell each other how many people you've slept with.
That should mean means nothing.
No. How many hamburgers have you had before you got married?
I'm an American, so too many.
Like, how many swims in the ocean have you had before you got married? Like, it shouldn't matter.
It doesn't make sense to me how even these married women who are going to be having children and raising the next generation, and that's how they're going to teach their daughters sex, just like having a hamburger. Just like swimming in the ocean, it doesn't matter. Have as much sex as you want with as many people as you want. Become incredibly vulnerable before as many people as you want, because your naked body, your vulnerability, your intimacy means nothing. It's like eating a hamburger. A man having sex with you is just like him having a hamburger. That's how worthless your body is.
Wow.
Oh, that was uplifting.
Well, there's a couple of things that I gather from that. I don't know who that woman is. I find it curious that she is being interviewed with her baby, in this very Madonna and child situation happening, and almost this vitriol that she has towards these women that are being interviewed on the street. I think you could drive a truck through her logic. These women are not saying that having sex correlates to eating hamburgers or swimming in the ocean. They're giving those as hypothetical examples of maybe a minute detail, a potentially minute detail that you wouldn't necessarily share with your partner, how many hamburgers you'd eaten in your life, how many times you'd swum in the ocean. And I feel like she's sexually shaming women for being sexual and maybe wanting to be vulnerable with a lot of people, and assuming that every time you have sex with someone, you are being vulnerable, and that your exchange with that person is the same exchange that she has when she has sex. So there's a lot of holes in her logic for me. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I feel like the optics are so important because we've got this like Madonna shaming the whores
Yes.
thing. It's like, it's not enough that she's a mother, she's breastfeeding while she's shaming them. And I personally feel like sacredness has been taken away from sex. And even though I've had sex that wasn't sacred, or with people I didn't, who weren't soulmates or whatnot, like I look back on that thinking that I wasn't honoring myself, because the reality is I'm taking another human into my body, and there's a lot of vulnerability there in terms of that moment and sharing my body with that person in that moment. There's also the vulnerability of procreating, of getting a disease. Like there are a lot of things that I think we would be wise to bring back into the conversation instead of making sex so casual. But at the same time, it's like, I honestly don't know how many people I've had sex with. And at this stage of the game, like no one cares. So those are some of my initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think casual sex can be sacred. I think that we can have sacred exchanges with people that we don't know, because there's a karmic connection that maybe we don't necessarily understand. Like you're being put in a situation when you meet someone and you feel that energy. Well, we don't know where that energy is coming from, how long, what the residual, you could say past life or DNA, cellular memory thing is with that person. So what could potentially seem as casual sex could be a deeply enmeshed, ingrained history that you have with this person that you've just met. I don't know if you've ever met someone where you just like, I feel like I've known this person my whole life. And I'm not getting woo-woo and saying it's definitely a past life thing. I'm saying it's a cellular memory where our DNA has been on this earth for so long that we have connected with other people so many times and other iterations that it's possible that there's a recognition that you have for someone. It's not my job and my duty to judge or shame a woman for having sex with 10,000 men or one man. It's not my job.
Not at all. So, I feel like the other piece that I just want to presence before I forget, and just fair warning to the audience, I'm just coming off of being super sick for the past 5 days, and this is my first attempt at podcasting. So thank you for your patience as I learn to speak again. One thing that I thought was odd in the thing is that no one feels that transparency with a potential marriage partner is important. And that is something that to me is actually the most disturbing. And I see this a lot in my coaching practice where I am utterly shocked by how many men and women are not honest with their partners. And I'm like, why are you even doing this? So if there's like some block where you have shame in telling someone who you're going to pledge your forever after to, I think that's something that is inviting examination, separate of the like shaming people for however many people we've had sex with. But in terms of karmic connections, yes, of course I've had those, but I also know that those don't necessarily translate to something healthy or supportive in 3D. And again, for me, having sex is a big deal, and there are lots of repercussions, including energetic ties. You are karmically corded in on a DNA level with every single person you have had sex with. That's a big deal. And for me, I learned this lesson the hard way when I found myself inconveniently pregnant. And my then boyfriend was in the Ukraine shooting a movie. And I couldn't even get in touch with him. And I handled it in my own very witchy way with herbs and Mother Nature, which, P.S., is available to everyone. Like, it's a really loving planet. We don't need to bring in Western medicine or whatnot. But it was a really challenging experience for me. And when I did finally get a hold of him, he goes, yeah, I think I'm going to stop by New York on my way back and just, hang out there for a couple weeks. I really miss my parents. And I was like, I have to be way more mindful about who I allow into my body, because this is something that could happen. And not only is this something that could happen, but then just seeing like his psycho-emotional inability and unwillingness to be there for me, maybe there was karma there, but was it worth it in this incarnation for me to go through all of that? I don't know. I don't really believe in regret, but again, for me, there are so many X factors at play when I'm allowing someone into my own body that for me personally, I'm a lot more cautious and slow about it. That being said, I have no shame for the people I've had sex with. I don't shame anyone else for how they do it, but I would hope that they would have enough self-respect and be stepping into a conscious, loving relationship with someone they're going to marry, that they would be able to be transparent about it.
Yeah, I think there's to me, the dichotomy is that women are supposed to be and I don't think they're supposed to be. I think that the sales pitch we've been sold is that we're supposed to be chaste when we marry, that we're not supposed to have ever had any kind of relationship with anyone else, that we are not supposed to be transparent about those things, that we are supposed to, it's like the first time you make love to your husband should be the first time you've ever made love to anyone. For me, that's very problematic, because I don't think that those same rules apply to men, where men are fed this ideology and this idea that they are supposed to be virile and they're supposed to have sex with lots and lots of people before they get married and have lots of experience, because they are the performers and they are the ones who are kind of running that show sexually. So I think where my perspective might confuse some people is that I think women should have the right to have sex with whoever they want to have sex with, as long as it's a consenting adult. They should totally have that freedom and not be judged for making those decisions. I think men should be able to have sex with as many or as few people as they want without being judged. Now, for me, the transparency comes when we're talking about sexually transmitted diseases. I'm more interested in how many people you've been in love with. than how many people you've had sex with. Because to me, those are way more entrenched and potentially fraught relationships than sexual contact. What I want to know is, how many same-sex partners have you had? Are you a man who's had sex with other men? Are you a man who has had sex with particularly young women? Is there a type of woman that you have looked for in the gamut of your sexual experiences? Those are the things that I'm most interested in, and I was interested in with my husband. So I understand the need and the desire for transparency, and I think that those things are important. I think if you're not comfortable telling someone what your number is, that's your right. I think you totally have that right. I don't think that it should influence or affect your relationship. There is some, I would say, like reptilian brain thing that happens where, you know, men don't want damaged goods and women want a man that has his, you know, knows his way around a vagina and knows his way around the bedroom. So I think there's that kind of narrative and that story that we've been told. But I don't think that those things are hard and fast rules. And so we've got to be able to understand that in 2023, you may be with someone who's been with a lot of people, who's a woman. You may be with someone who's a man who hasn't had a lot of partners. I think a lot of that alchemy has to be in understanding that you shouldn't necessarily judge someone based on what those numbers are. People should be able to hold accountability for themselves and understand that, yes, that does influence and affect a relationship potentially. But am I in a relationship with the other women that my partner has been in with, or am I in a relationship with him? I think the through line I'm looking for is, how did he treat those women? What is the relationship now he has with those women? That I'm more interested in than how many people he fucked. What I care about is, does he treat women with integrity and respect? If he fucked a lot of women, is it because he is a hypersexual person and he needed to have lots of sex with lots of different people? If he was only with one woman, to me, that's a little bit of a red flag. If a man or a woman has only been with one person. So this idea that chastity somehow raises your value, I think that is something I'm not on board with.
That's another interesting point, what you just said, and that really resonated. Like that is a red flag if you've only been with like one or two people. For me, the number thing just doesn't come up. And, you know, as someone who's walked through life single, you know, I've had plenty of relationships and long-term relationships, but like, given the way that I roll and other creative people that I'm attracted to roll, we tend to have had a lot of partners. I'm not really attracted to people who, you know, lock down with that like conservative, you know, white picket fence, happily ever after thing. I'm not really attracted to that. But I also, in terms of like this chastity thing, I don't really see that in my reality. But this is something that I'm noticing is like, there's so many different timelines and realities going. So people talk about, you know, racism or homophobia where they live. And I'm like, I believe that that's real for you. That is not real in my reality construct at all. So in my reality construct, I see sluttiness being more elevated. I see a real clear demoralization campaign that is attacking adolescents and in training them to sexualize themselves and be sexually active from such a young age, when in, you know, from my own perspective, I would hope that they would still be able to safeguard their innocence and, you know, stretch that out as long as possible. So for me, it's a little bit reverse. I don't see that happening so much. I do see this like Christian right-wing backlash, as perfectly exemplified by the breastfeeding mother shaming these women, you know. So I see that coming out now as its own op. But and shaming around the numbers again, it's just like, who cares? Like, for me, I'm more interested in like, what have you learned and where are you going? When I'm like dating someone, I don't want to talk about my past relationships, who gives a shit? Who are you now and where are you going?
Yeah, I totally hear that. And I think there is a, you know, where I'm kind of in a Switzerland perspective in these two versions of these women's realities, is that how I see it is that there's definitely a ritual objectification and sexualization. Oh God, are you there? Sorry about that. I don't know how that happened. I think there's a ritual objectification and sexualization of men and women, young men and young women, that has some nefarious roots. And I definitely agree with that. And I definitely see that. I don't know why that keeps happening. That's so weird. It's coming through my computer. So that's weird to me, that there are some dark roots and a dark nature to that energy. And it's really disconcerting to think that women are associating their value with sex and with their sexuality. And I don't think that that's a positive at all. But that being said, I think that you are the one who determines what is sacred sexuality and how much energy you put into that space and how you honor your own body. And I know we've talked about this before, because I've worked in the sex work world, that I had sacred sex in that space, in a space where this woman would see that as shame and worthlessness, and that me having sexual experiences or intimate experiences with multiple men is just like having a hamburger. I think that is denying men's sacred energy as well. And it's looking at men and saying that men are just knuckle dragging simians. They're just fuckers who just fuck, and they have no feelings. They have no ownership to any emotion whatsoever. That it is demeaning a man's attachment to the sacred feminine, and it's demeaning the man's attachment to women and denying that. And I think that's very pedestrian. It's a very pedestrian way of looking at men. I think she's limiting men's capacity for being intimate.
Well, I want to get into the man thing, but before we do that, I want to know, what about the sex you were having as a sex worker made it sacred?
I think men's ability to be vulnerable in a space that they felt safe in. I think that's what made it sacred. I think in the consensus or default world, I think a lot of men feel very guarded when they go into a dating situation with a woman. And so it's hard for them and this is obviously my experience. I'm not speaking across the board in generalizations. I'm speaking about my anecdotal experience. I think what I witnessed is that I saw men being capable of letting their guard down and being able to be more forthcoming and more honest about their feelings in that space. Because
what were you doing that allowed them to have that experience?
I wasn't judging them. I wasn't judging them by how they looked, by how much money they had, by how they spoke. I had no expectations of them. It was an energetic when someone goes into like a brothel, for example, the men are given the opportunity to select the woman they want to be with. The woman has the opportunity to reject that man if she wants to. So there is a millisecond exchange that's happening energetically between you and another human being. And in that exchange, a decision is being made of, am I going to be intimate with you? Am I going to walk in? We've known each other for 20 seconds. Am I going to walk into another room and take my clothes off and be vulnerable with you? Am I willing to do that? And I think I had the ability to do that because I was living in a very transient world. I was living in another country. I had no familial ties where I was. So I was kind of floating in this ether and in this environment. And so that put me in a different place where I wasn't judging people in the same constructs of, I've known this guy since high school. I know where he works. I know, like, he wasn't embedded in some idea of who he is. So it was more of a human to human exchange than, does this guy have a nice car? Does he have a good job? Is he going to be able to take care of me? Is he going to be able to take care of kids if we decide to go down that road? So I wasn't writing all these stories about these men. And I think because of that, they were walking into a situation where it was just human to human. And I think that gave them the capacity to be more vulnerable because they knew I wasn't going to call them. They knew I wasn't going to hunt them down. They knew that I wasn't playing a game of trying to fashion them into some reality or into some role that maybe they did or did not want to be in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so when you're talking about that it's sacred for men as well, and we're not honoring that, can you speak more about that? Because from my perspective, like from one side of it, I can see, yes, that could be the case.
Yeah.
But in my experience with men, it just isn't. A lot of men, it's very base. They'll do their like pound thing and only care about themselves unless really trained and called into something different. And I've done, a zillion tantra workshops and, polarity, this and that and whatnot. And consistently in all of those, it's like, men, you need to slow down to match the woman's energy and allow the woman to warm up, to open up, to get wet, all of those things to then be able to really take you to very high places. So in my experience, I don't see men being naturally wired on the day-to-day for like a sacred sexual honoring in the way that maybe it's just me projecting what I want onto humanity.
I think, in a situation, like in a sex work situation, those men were walking into my world. And I think that had a lot to do with it. I think what a lot of them realize when they go into that kind of a situation is that there's a symbiotic thing that's happening, and they're either going to comply with that energy and be a part of that, like ride that wave, or they're going to be resistant and they're going to shut down. And not every woman that is in a sex work world is doing that as a sacred right. They're just not. There's some women that are just in there. They're trying to make money for formula. They're trying to make money for their rent or for their whatever their drug habit is. I saw a lot of that where it was like, I just need to make enough money so I can buy a bag of weed or I can do whatever, and then I'm out of here. So not every woman was going in with this idea that they were there to be worshipped. And so they are going to attract those kinds of men that want to fuck, and that's it. And so that's going to be a different exchange. I had situations when I was with couples. I had situations where it was a double, where there was two women and one man. And in most of my experiences, the thing that was so fascinating is the man was just like, you take the lead, you tell me, this is your body, like you show me what I'm allowed to do, basically. It wasn't like, I've paid my money and I'm going to get off and I'm going to, because that's not the energy I was approaching that with. So I use that as a learning tool and a learning experience for men. So if someone was doing something that didn't feel good, I didn't just shut up and let him do it. I was like, why don't you try this? Touch me like a flower, saying things to kind of guide that, where it then becomes sacred, because you are not allowing someone just to do something to you until 29 minutes rolls on the clock and you can kick them the fuck out. I had those experiences with young men that were, in their 20s to an 85-year-old man, so I think so much of that is informed by what you are bringing into that situation. And I think for me, how I see this woman's perspective is that she doesn't see the value in being naked with multiple people, because she has a perspective of what that means for her. So she's assuming that that same perspective is what it means for all women. I think you can have both. I think you can feel that your body is sacred. You can share your body with people and it's still sacred. I think that it does not make your body worthless. And I don't think that those women were saying, those, potentially tipsy women on the street were saying that if you don't tell people how many people you've had sex with, that means that you're worthless. I think that there's a huge journey between those two realities. And I just don't perceive that this woman understood that. And I just found that so fascinating, and how vitriolic she was about it. Like, they're teaching women. No, they're not. They're just saying what their experience is. So maybe their experience isn't your experience, and it doesn't invalidate who they are because you've had a different life experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the leap that she made had nothing to do with what they were saying. They were saying we don't need to share our numbers. They weren't saying like anyone can fuck me. Like,
Exactly.
who cares? Yeah, 100%. And I also think, my perspective is informed by a lifetime of experimentation and exploration, so I'm happy that I did have all of that to come to this place. But I think I'm speaking in terms of like the larger demoralization of culture that just really hurts my heart. And, the grooming of children that we're seeing now. And, like one of my favorite homeschool students just turned 18.
Mm-hmm.
And I follow her on social media, and this is like, my homeschool student. And her birthday picture was a picture of her breasts and like honey dripping down her breasts. And my judgment, my shit, it broke my fucking heart. And I wish I'd never seen it. And it's like, this is my perspective and my shit. But it was just like, oh, sweetie, like, this is what 18 means, of like this, you're sexualizing yourself this way as a way to celebrate. And, that's my shit. But it really hurts my heart for all the girls whose innocence is just being taken, or that they're being indoctrinated to give away at such an early age.
I totally hear you. And I think that the difference for me as a 54-year-old woman is that there was no social media when I was taking sexualized photos of myself. I was doing that, and maybe in some regard, you could look at it and say, well, I did it more in an artful fashion because I was doing black and white photos and doing self-portraits, in this way that I had to go and and take that film and have it developed. And there was more of a process and getting the photos and the contact sheets. And, you know, I have been a photographer my whole life from the time I was a little girl. So I totally understand how maybe in hindsight, when she is 54 years old, she may look back and say, what the fuck did I do putting that on social media? You know, I don't know how many people have downloaded or screenshotted that photo and have jerked off to it, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, she has no idea the implications of doing that because her frontal lobe is not fully formed. So
No.
her decision making is not there. And she clearly doesn't have someone in her life, her parents, her friends, her peers, who are saying, you know, beautiful picture, but maybe you shouldn't be putting that online. So she's trying to express something that women have been expressing for thousands of years, trying to understand, trying to navigate their sexual energy. The issue where it becomes problematic is she's doing it in a public sphere. She's not doing it just for her lover. She's not doing it just for herself. She thinks she's doing it just for herself, but she's sharing it with the world to get likes because she wants positive feedback, but she doesn't know who is engaging in that dialogue with her. So I think it's really unfortunate. I think our job is to, as women, is to support people like that and to maybe have some kind of a exchange with them and say, you know, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal to you. Your account's private. You have a limited amount of friends. You've put maybe safeguards in place to protect yourself. So you don't really see the implications of what you're doing. But how are you going to feel about that in 20 years, in 30 years, in 40 years, in 50 years? And before you post something, maybe you should think about that, because you may not feel the same way about what you're doing now as you do when you're older. You may look back in the rearview mirror and say, why the fuck did I do that? And I'm certainly not saying that I didn't have sex with people in my life that I was like, why the fuck did I do that? But that was in my personal life. In my professional life, I feel good about everything that I did in that sphere. In my personal life, I look back and I say to myself, I was desperate for love. I was desperate for love. I was desperate for attention. I thought my only value was sexual because that's what I was taught as a child, that the only value I had is the pleasure I gave other people. So that translated into a life of unrequited love, bad relationships. And I think when I got into the sexual work field, I suddenly saw a different value in that energy. And I suddenly saw that I could take that energy and transmute that energy and walk away from something feeling good about it, as opposed to feeling bad about it. Because it hurts to have sex with someone that you really like and you're really into, and you get caught up in that sexual energy, and then it doesn't work out with that person. It fucking sucks. It absolutely sucks when you feel that that person's been deceitful and you've been vulnerable and they haven't been vulnerable. So I'm not saying that everyone should monetize their sexuality. I'm not saying that your homeschooler should monetize your sexuality at all. I'm saying that we have to be very thoughtful about how we engage in our sexuality in every aspect of our lives. And sometimes that's going to mean being vulnerable with people who don't deserve you. Sometimes that's a hard ass fucking lesson that you've got to learn.
1,000%. And like, as you well know, like I'm no stranger to that lesson. I think it's just also like watching how reckless we are with sex in general, and that it's so powerful. You know, like that Kundalini energy has so much intelligence. Sexual energy is so healing. And just watching the bulk of humanity completely misuse it, completely miss the boat on it. And as well, how quick we are to jump into bed with one another. Whereas before there used to be like courtship and multiple dates and like, oh, did you get to second base? A few more dates. Did you get to third? And like we were getting to know one another and earning one another's trust. That is totally off the table now. People have sex so quickly. And I see this in my clients and I see this in my girlfriends. When they have sex with someone so fast, I'm talking to a crazy person. I'm like, I'm not even talking to you. I'm talking to the hormones that have shut down your critical thinking and you sound insane because it's just your hormones talking. You know, so I think that's another thing that we would be wise to be mindful of, that the hormones that are released when we have sex literally make us crazy. So when we do that before we have properly vetted the person, we get ourselves into sticky situations. I'll just speak for myself. Have gotten to myself in some very sticky situations because the hormones have taken over and I'm not even seeing straight, and I see it happening so often.
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing about the vetting process is that we can do that and still get hurt and still get let down.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes this thing of, you have betrayed the vetting process because you got what you wanted and then you ghosted me, or you know, so is it better to fuck someone and get it out of the way and then see if there's still something there? Or is it better to go through this vetting process and then potentially have that person fuck you over or break up with you? In both situations, we are being put into a position where we have to be vulnerable. And what that means is that the potential to get hurt exists in both of these realities. I think this is where we have to put on our big girl pants and say, you know what? If I want to be in love with somebody, I'm going to be vulnerable. If I want to fuck somebody, I'm going to be vulnerable. Guess what? Being a human means you're going to be vulnerable. So there's no way to nerf our reality from being hurt. There's just not. What we have to do is have the capacity to heal our energy and stop projecting our state on other people. It's not that guy's fault or problem if he didn't fall in love with you. It's not your fault or problem if you don't want to fuck somebody and you decide not to. I think where we are getting fucked over is our expectations of other people, that someone else is going to fill our slot for us. It's got to be okay to have sex with somebody, and maybe it's not the best sex in the world and you regret it and you're like, what? Wow, that was a lesson. You know, this is how we figure out what we want in life, is by doing things or not doing them. It's the intuition that we've lost, which is, do I want to? Well, no. Do I feel pressured to? No. Well, if I was pressured, then that's a whole different conversation. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be willing to take responsibility for our own states and stop projecting it on the world. I feel sorry for your homeschool girl because she thinks that those likes are validating her. She could have taken that beautiful photo of herself and kept it for herself and kept that energy without having to feel that she needed to share that with the world. That's the experimentation of your own sacred sexual energy.
Yeah, and I want to be mindful because I'm close with her family. I love her family. You know, this is my own projection, my own judgment. It was a beautiful picture. It's just me wanting to safeguard children's innocence for as long as possible. That's my own thing that I'm projecting onto that. I wish I hadn't seen it, you know, because
Yeah.
I want her to continue to be my, you know, my homeschool student forever. In my mind, I have this image of her, but you know, maybe
course.
that's my shit.
Yeah, but no one coerced her, as far as you know.
I don't think
And
so.
took that photo and put it online without her consent. So I think that's where we have to look at that stuff and say, okay, how much responsibility does this girl have over herself versus the reaction that other people have to what she is posting? So if you freak out, that's on you. That's not on her. It's unfortunate that she feels that she needs, I'm not saying it's unfortunate that she needs to take the photo. It's unfortunate that she needs validation from other people. And that's why she's posting that photo, because she's not posting it for herself. She's posting it so other people will respond to that. And so is there a lack in her life, a lack of a sense of herself? Is she just trying to investigate her sexuality? Of course, that's what we do. So your job is to love her and support her and speak to her if she asks you about it. You know, be the alpha in that situation and encourage her to examine her sexuality. I think it's important. I think what's not important is for the predators to have control over that. I think that's what we have to stop, is this other energy that's coming in that's pushing young women into this perspective of thinking that that's their only value.
Yeah, I mean that's that's what I'm railing against, is that monster, that entity that has slipped its way into culture and has convinced so many women that without that they're worthless. And it's odd to me because I've been railing against that since I was a little kid. You know, I've always been the one born and raised in LA, like pushing against that. So it's weird to me in 2023 that like we're still there. This is what we're still doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's so bizarre. I'm going to see if I can find this thing. I don't know if I have access to drop something in here.
I'll give you screen share access. Stand by. Once I figure out how to do it. Oh wait, we almost had it.
Okay.
I'm just making you the host,
Okay.
and then you can do whatever you want.
Okay. So this is an example of, let me expand, let me close this and then expand this. This is the example of what I grew up with.
There's one person nobody can resist, and that's a baby.
No.
When a baby soft. But the innocent scent of a cuddly, clean baby.
Is she licking that?
Very sexy. Performing body lotion, body powder, and body mist. Some of the sentiment will be the sexiest fragrance around. Loves baby soft because innocence is sexier than you think. For your baby at Christmas.
Oh, okay, I'm confused. Was she licking the cookie like it's a lollipop? She seems to be having trouble actually getting a bite happening. She seems a little retarded.
So that's the imagery. This is how long this has been going on.
Wow.
Nothing is as sexy as a baby.
That was really creepy.
Yeah, super, super disturbing. So women have been told throughout history that their sexual energy is their cachet. That is their value. That's what they have to offer. What is so interesting is this idea that young women are the only women that have value. Babies are what have sexual cachet and value. Little girls. So this idea, and I've talked to Chris about this. It's so fascinating. This whole movement of human trafficking and children and pedophilia. And what I was saying to him is none of this is new. Child brides, people marrying 8-year-olds, none of this shit is new. Historically, this has happened throughout the human experience. And I said, why do you think that is? And it's so disturbing because we have children, we love humans, we love children, but not in that way. It's so fucked up to think that someone could be minor attracted and that's now being normalized.
The fact that that's even a phrase, like, no, they're a pedophile.
Yeah. And the reason I was saying to him, he was like, I just don't understand why this is a thing. And I said, well, what men have been trained to think is that they need to be in control. It's very difficult to control a grown-ass woman. Oh, it's very difficult to control an alpha female. It's very, very easy to control a child. An alpha female can see right through your bullshit. Point blank. A little kid can't. No. So the reason a man is going to be more attracted to someone way, way younger is not because older women aren't attractive, older women aren't beautiful. It's because they can run a game on a young woman. They can bullshit a young woman. You can't bullshit an older woman who has had a full life. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the sales pitch in this predatorial situation that we see right now is older women, they've hit their expiry date. You don't want to be with an old broad. You want to be with a young girl that you can control. So then you don't really have to have any sacred energy with that person because you don't have to be vulnerable with a little girl. You can be the man, and if you've got a little dick, it'll make your dick look bigger if it's a small hand that's touching it. So again, it's this idea that old women are outmoded, young women are the direction to go. So what does that do? It causes young women to think that they have all the power and causes young women to think that they are the ones in control of that dynamic in that relationship. When in reality, those women aren't in control. Those men are running numbers on them because they can. So this is where these young women get angry because they think like, I'm the one holding the cards here and you should be bowing down to, well, you don't have any true power because you haven't fully developed who you are as a person. You don't know who you are as a person. So you're going into this situation, into a relationship with no fucking clue of who this man is and what he's capable of. Thoughts?
Well, I also think, it's asinine to think that you have the power if you're with a man who is wanting to date someone significantly younger. Like, is that not a red flag to you that this person isn't wanting to date a peer? I think it also, in terms of why men are doing it, I think you're spot on in terms of they're not going to be called on anything. And I've seen this with so many of my male friends, and it's appalling to watch the relationships of men my age dating younger, and just watching how they literally treat them like children, and there is no respect for their opinion or whatnot. It's like, it's a very my way or the highway thing. but also it's about a tight pussy and how we are completely objectified as holes to get off on. And so I look at the past, few decades of this, bikini waxing thing and bald pussies, and then going back to like women playing along with it. Why are we going along with men's preference for prepubescent children by allowing ourselves to be mutilated? It's so painful to be waxed, to look like that, so again, it's like it takes two to tango. So looking at where we're playing that game and allowing ourselves to be objectified, allowing ourselves to emulate young prepubescent girls, for sexual currency or whatnot. Yeah, the whole thing's so super creepy.
Well, when in the time that I worked in Planned Parenthood, I saw lots and lots of vulvas. I saw lots of vaginas. And if a man wants a tight pussy, he should be with a morbidly obese woman, because morbidly obese women have tight pussies. Fun fact, in my experience. Women who body shape and body size and age has nothing to do with the flexibility or the size of a woman's vagina or her vulva. So I think that is a misconception that maybe some men have, is that, a young woman is going to have a tight pussy. That's not necessarily the case. It's all genetics. So I did see women that were morbidly obese that had insanely tight pussies. I hate to be so graphic, but it's kind of hilarious that we're talking about this. And it's because of the weight of the belly and the bladder and all of these things kind of compressing. So, I just think that when it comes down to it, the men that I know who have gone into these relationships with young women don't want to be challenged intellectually. They don't want to be challenged in terms of their lives and how they engage with their partner. It's really about, again, being in control of a dynamic or in control of a person. And what's interesting is that the energy levels don't match. So the life experience doesn't match. And the references, the cultural references don't match. So you could be with a girl who's 20 years younger than you are, but she doesn't know what you know. And some men are cool with that. Some women are cool with that. But at the same time, they're going to want to do different things. So if you're a 50-year-old guy and you're still clubbing it, then you may need to reassess your life choices, from my perspective. If you are a 16-year-old girl and you're hanging out with a 60-year-old man, you may want to take a look at that. And this whole idea of like, oh, she's an old soul, bullshit. I'm calling bullshit on that. No, not an old soul. She's a person that you have decided fits into this parameter and this dynamic. I love the movie Ghost World. I love that movie. It's also super creepy. It's super creepy. And on so many different levels. I think because you see someone who is curious, a young woman who's curious about this guy who seems kind of menschy and kind of awkward, and there's a curiosity there, but she's taking advantage of him. He's taking advantage of her. And neither one of them ends up happy in that circumstance. And it's sad. It's sad because it's kind of sold as a love story in some regards, but it's also kind of this weird anecdotal version of, this girl's then vulnerable. And so she fucks him and then he ends up fucking her over and she ends up fucking, it's just so weird. Like, you have to be able to look at that and say, this is the culture we are being taught, that, you know, young women should be attracted to older men and older men should be attracted to younger women, and that should be normal and we should be okay with that, as opposed to, you know, maybe that guy shouldn't be with this dorky girl he's not really into. Maybe he should try to find another girlfriend who is into the same kind of stuff, that likes the weird records he likes, that, like, you know, it's like, it's being, you know, set into this framework of there's only two options here.